I invited my family to my award ceremony. Dad laughed. Just a lowly secretary. My sister replied, "We're busy going to dinner." Mom liked the message. I smiled and said, "That's fine." That night, while they ate, Dad scrolled his phone and froze. "What is this?" Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I stared at the black screen of my phone. It sat on my vanity like a paperweight, heavy with the things I had chosen not to say. Most people would have thrown it. Most people would have typed a furious paragraph detailing exactly why they were wrong, listing my accolades, demanding the respect I had earned. But I didn't. I simply set it down and turned to the mirror. My silence wasn't weakness. It was a strategy. It was a muscle I had been training since I was 7 years old. That was the year my sister Sarah won a local beauty pageant. And my father, Brian, spent 3 weeks talking about her poise, her grace, her future. That same week, I had scored perfect marks in math, but when I tried to show him, he patted my head without looking and told me not to interrupt the star of the show. I learned then that in the economy of my family, attention was a finite resource, and Sarah had a monopoly. Fighting for it only resulted in humiliation. If I screamed, I was dramatic. If I cried, I was too sensitive. If I achieved, I was showing off. So, I learned to go underground. I built a life in the quiet spaces where they didn't look. I learned that if you don't ask for approval, they can't deny it. If you don't invite them in, they can't wreck the furniture. My silence was a security clearance, and they didn't have access. I pulled the zipper of my gown up. It was midnight blue, silk, understated but expensive. I had bought it with my own money, from a salary they assumed was $40,000 a year but was actually triple that. They thought I was a travel agent. That was the box they had built for me. Jasmine, books, flights, they would tell their friends. She helps volunteers find hotels. It was easier to let them believe that than to explain the reality. The reality was satellite phones buzzing at 3 in the morning. The reality was negotiating airspace clearance over war zones to get medical supplies into hospitals that had been bombed. The reality was managing logistics for global crises, where a single delay meant a body count. I wasn't a travel agent. I was a crisis commander. I moved mountains, fleets, and millions of dollars in aid, while my family worried about the appetizers at a networking mixer. I looked at my reflection. The woman in the mirror wasn't the travel agent. She was the woman Marcus Sterling, a man worth billions, called when his foundation hit a wall. She was the woman who had solved a supply chain collapse in Sudan with 2 phone calls and a favors list 10 years deep. My father chased status like a hungry dog chases a car. He wanted to be seen. He wanted to be important. He didn't realize that true power is rarely the loudest thing in the room. True power is the person who holds the keys. I applied my lipstick, a sharp, dark red. I didn't need them at this gala. I had invited them as a courtesy. A final test they had failed spectacularly. The old Jasmine, the little girl who wanted her dad to look at her math test, might have been hurt. But the woman standing here now just felt a cold, clinical detachment. They had chosen their level of involvement. They had chosen the networking mixer, the noise, the desperate climb for social relevance. I was choosing the work. I was choosing the quiet dignity of knowing exactly who I was without needing them to confirm it. I picked up my clutch. I left my phone on the vanity, screen down. I wouldn't need it tonight. Tonight was about the people who actually saw me. I walked out of my apartment, and the silence I left behind wasn't empty. It was fortified. The ballroom of the convention center was a galaxy of crystal and polished steel. It smelled of expensive floral arrangements and power. I walked through the double doors, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the marble floor. I checked in at the VIP desk, and the woman behind the laptop smiled with genuine warmth. "Miss Jasmine, we're so glad you're here. Mr. Sterling has been asking for you." I thanked her and made my way to table 1. It was front and center, reserved for the night's honorees. I took my seat. To my right sat the director of operations for the Red Cross. To my left, 2 empty chairs. I had reserved them for my father and Sarah. I had even printed their name cards. Now, those cards sat there, stark white rectangles mocking me under the chandelier light. Brian and Sarah. I reached out and turned them face down. I didn't feel sad. I felt efficient. I signaled a waiter. "Please remove these settings," I said quietly. "My guests won't be arriving." Across town, in a hotel bar that was trying too hard to be trendy, my family was fighting for air. The networking mixer Sarah had bragged about was a disaster. The room was overcrowded, hot, and loud. It was filled with mid-level managers and aspiring influencers all shouting over a DJ who didn't know how to read the room. My father, Brian, was sweating through his suit. He scanned the crowd desperately, looking for Marcus Sterling. He had heard a rumor that Sterling might make an appearance. That was the whole reason they were here. He wanted to pitch his consulting firm. He wanted the proximity to wealth that he believed would finally validate him. "Do you see him?" he shouted to Sarah over the thumping bass. "No," she snapped, checking her makeup in her phone camera. "But he has to be here. This is the place to be." They pushed through the crowd. Bumping shoulders, spilling drinks, eyes darting around like predators who had realized too late that they were actually the prey. They were nobodies here, just more noise in a room full of it. Back at the gala, the lights dimmed. The screens on either side of the stage lit up with footage from the last year's relief efforts, earthquakes, floods, conflict zones. I watched the images flicker, remembering the nights I had spent coordinating the supply drops in those exact locations. I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to see Marcus Sterling standing there. He wasn't on a stage or behind a velvet rope. He was right next to me. "Jasmine," he said, extending a hand. "I hear I have you to thank for the logistics in Haiti." I stood up and shook his hand. His grip was firm, real. "It was a team effort, sir," I said. "Don't be modest," he replied, smiling. "My team tells me you're the one who found the cargo planes when everyone else said they were grounded. That's not a team effort. That's command." We spoke for 10 minutes. Real conversation. He asked about my strategy for the upcoming hurricane season. He listened to my answers. He didn't look over my shoulder for someone more important. In that moment, I was more visible than I had ever been in my father's house. The MC took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we honor those who work in the shadows to bring light to the darkest places. Please welcome our first honoree for the Global Impact Award, Jasmine." I stood up. The applause was thunderous. It washed over me, warm and solid. I walked to the stage, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look back to see if anyone was watching. I knew who was watching. The people who mattered. The next morning, the sun streamed into my apartment with a brightness that felt like a fresh start. I made coffee, the rich aroma filling the kitchen, and sat down at my small dining table. I didn't check my phone immediately. I wanted to hold on to the feeling from last night a little longer, the weight of the award in my hands, the sincerity in Marcus Sterling's eyes. It was a feeling of solidity, of having built something that couldn't be knocked down by a snide text message. Across the city, in a trendy brunch spot that charged $18 for avocado toast, my family was nursing hangovers. The networking mixer had ended poorly. Brian had cornered a mid-level executive who turned out to be an intern, and Sarah had broken a heel trying to navigate the crowded dance floor. They were tired, irritable, and looking for someone to blame. Sarah pulled out her phone, scrolling through social media with a scowl. "This place is overrated," she muttered, stabbing at her eggs. "And the service is terrible." Brian rubbed his temples. "We just need one connection, Sarah. Just one in with Sterling's people. If we can get a meeting, I can sell him on the consultancy." Sarah stopped scrolling. Her thumb hovered over the screen. A notification had popped up. A tag. From a stranger. At Sarah J. Design. "Isn't this your sister? Did you know she knows Marcus Sterling?" Sarah frowned. "What is this?" She clicked the link. The video opened. It was a professional recording from the gala. The camera panned across the ballroom, capturing the elegance, the scale of the event. Then it cut to the stage. There I was, standing at the podium, the award gleaming in my hands. But it wasn't just me. Standing next to me, beaming with genuine admiration, was Marcus Sterling. Brian leaned over, squinting at the small screen. Is that Jasmine? On the video, Marcus leaned into the microphone. I'd like to present this award to a woman who doesn't just manage logistics, she manages hope. Jasmine is the woman who saved my foundation during the crisis in Sudan. Without her, we wouldn't have gotten aid to thousands of people. The restaurant noise faded into a dull roar for Brian. He watched Marcus Sterling, the man he had idolized, the man he had spent years trying to impress, the man he had dragged his family to a sweaty bar just to glimpse hug his daughter. He watched Marcus shake her hand with the kind of respect Brian had craved his entire life. He knows her, Brian whispered. The words came out strangled. He knows her name. It was a collision of realities. For years, Brian had built his world on a simple hierarchy. He was the important businessman. Sarah was the star, and I was the support staff. I was the travel agent. I was the one who booked the flights, not the one who flew on the private jets. But the screen didn't lie. The screen showed a different hierarchy. It showed me at the top, standing next to the king, while Brian sat in a brunch spot realizing he wasn't even in the castle. It was cognitive dissonance in real time. His brain couldn't reconcile the Secretary Jasmine he had created with the Commander Jasmine on the screen. The gap between his perception and reality was so wide it caused a kind of vertigo. He felt small. He felt foolish. And worst of all, he felt irrelevant. He looked at his empty wallet on the table, a symbol of the status he tried to buy. Then he looked at the screen, where I stood with nothing but my work and my name. He realized then that he had been chasing a ghost, while I had been building an empire. She never told us, Sarah said, her voice shrill. Why didn't she tell us? She invited us, Christine said quietly. She was staring at the video, her face pale. She sent us the invite. We said no. Brian put his head in his hands. The shame was a physical weight. It wasn't regret for missing my moment. It was the crushing realization that he had bet on the wrong horse, and everyone, the stranger in the comments, the people at the gala, the entire internet now knew it. The texts didn't come with apologies. They didn't come with, "I'm sorry we missed it," or "We're so proud of you." They came with the frantic, entitled energy of investors realizing they had sold their stock right before it skyrocketed. I sat in my office, phone flat on the desk, watching the notifications stack up like incoming mortar fire. Sarah was first. You knew. You knew we were dying to meet Marcus Sterling, and you kept him to yourself. That is so selfish, Jasmine. You made us look like idiots. Then my father. Why didn't you say Sterling was the presenter? We could have come. We need to set up a lunch. Does he know about my consulting firm? Fix this. I read the messages with the same detached focus I used when reviewing cargo manifests. There was no love here. There was only leverage. They weren't reaching out to a daughter or a sister. They were reaching out to a contact. I had suddenly become a resource, an asset to be mined. For years, I had been just Jasmine, the boring one, the one who booked flights. Now, I was Jasmine who knows Marcus Sterling. I was a bridge, and they wanted to walk all over me to get to him. I didn't feel the sting of betrayal. That nerve had been dead for a long time. Instead, I felt a professional clarity. In my line of work, you learn to spot opportunists. You learn to spot the local officials who only want to help when the cameras are rolling, the suppliers who jack up prices when the crisis hits. You identify them, you flag them, and you cut them out of the supply chain. My family had just flagged themselves. I thought about the years of dismissal, the birthday dinners where they talked over me, the way Brian would interrupt my stories to talk about Sarah's potential. They had spent decades building a reality where I was small so they could feel big. Now that reality had collapsed, and instead of admitting they were wrong, they were trying to annex my success. They wanted to colonize the life I had built without them. I opened my laptop. I had work to do. Real work. But the phone kept buzzing. Brian was calling now. He wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted: access. I decided to treat this like any other security breach. When an unauthorized entity tries to gain access to a secure site, you don't negotiate. You deny entry. I picked up the phone. I didn't answer the call. I typed a text. It needed to be cold. It needed to be final. It needed to be a language they understood, the language of business. I am not a networking opportunity. I am not a bridge for your consultancy or your social climbing. You declined the invitation to my life. Access is now revoked. I hit send. It was harsh. It was precise. It was the truth. The response was immediate and volatile. The pivot happened instantly. They switched from wheedling to attacking. Brian, you ungrateful brat. After everything I paid for, you owe me this meeting. Sarah, you think you're better than us now? You're still just an assistant, Jasmine. Marcus Sterling doesn't care about you. He's just being nice. I watched the texts roll in, analyzing the data. They were panicking. They were lashing out because they had lost control of the narrative. They couldn't handle a world where I held the cards. I didn't block them yet. I needed the record. I needed the evidence of who they really were when the mask slipped. I let them scream into the digital void. I went back to my spreadsheet, adjusting the logistics for a shipment of water purification tablets to a flood zone. That was the difference between us. They were fighting for relevance. I was fighting for results. And I didn't have room on my team for liabilities. They showed up at my office on a Tuesday morning. It was a tactical error on their part, born of desperation. The Global Disaster Response HQ isn't a place you just walk into. It's a secure facility. I was in a briefing about a developing typhoon when the receptionist buzzed me. Jasmine, there are 3 people here to see you. They claim to be family. They're making a scene. I sighed, closing my folder. I'll handle it. Don't let them pass the lobby. I walked down the long corridor, my heels striking the floor with a rhythm that felt like a countdown. I wasn't angry. I was done. When I entered the lobby, the scene was exactly as I had predicted. Brian was arguing with the security guard, trying to use his business voice to intimidate a man who had guarded checkpoints in active war zones. Sarah was pacing, looking at her phone, while Christine stood by the door, looking embarrassed but compliant. Jasmine, Brian shouted when he saw me. Tell this rent-a-cop to let us in. We need to talk. I stopped 10 feet away. I didn't invite them closer. You are trespassing, I said. My voice was low, level. This is a place of business. Leave. We're not leaving until you fix this, Sarah snapped. Do you know how embarrassing this is? People are asking questions. You need to post something. Tell everyone it was a misunderstanding. Tell Marcus Sterling we're close. Close? I repeated the word. It tasted like ash. We haven't been close since I was 7 years old. Stop being dramatic, Brian growled. We are your family. We made you who you are. Without my support. What support? I interrupted. The support where you called me a secretary? The support where you ignored every achievement I ever had until it came with a billionaire attached? I was motivating you. He yelled. I pushed you to be better. And now that you've made it, you owe us. You owe us access. I've already told my partners I can get a meeting with Sterling. If you don't make that happen, I look like a liar. And there it was. The lethal discovery. The twist. I stared at him. You told your partners? He faltered, realizing he had said too much. You used my name, I said, the pieces falling into place. You've been trading on a connection you don't have. You've been promising access to Marcus Sterling to secure your own loans, haven't you? That's why you're so desperate. It's not about pride. It's about fraud. Brian's face went gray. It's not fraud. It's leveraging assets. I am not your asset, I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out a file. I had prepared it with the legal team that morning, suspecting something like this might happen. This is a cease and desist order, I said, handing it to him. It states that you are to stop using my name, my image, and any implied connection to Marcus Sterling or this organization for your business dealings. If you continue, our legal department will sue you for misrepresentation and damages. Brian took the papers, his hands shaking. You? I would sue a man who is compromising my professional integrity, I corrected. You wanted a professional relationship? Here it is. This is how I handle liabilities. Sarah gaped at me. You're a monster. No, I said. I'm a commander, and I'm securing my perimeter. I turned to the security guard. Escort them out. If they return, call the police. I didn't watch them leave. I turned around and walked back toward the secure doors. I swiped my badge. The green light beeped, and I stepped through, leaving them on the other side of the glass. They were screaming, waving their arms, pounding on the door. But the glass was soundproof. I couldn't hear them. I walked away, and the silence that followed was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. 6 months later, I stood in my new office at the Geneva headquarters. The view was different here. Instead of the chaotic skyline of Washington, D.C., I looked out over the calm, steel-gray water of the lake. The air was thinner, cleaner. I had been promoted to Director of Global Logistics. The title came with a security clearance that required a background check so deep they probably knew what I ate for breakfast in 3rd grade. When the investigators asked about my family connections, I handed them the cease and desist order and the police report from the lobby incident. They noted it, filed it, and cleared me. In my world, clear boundaries are an asset, not a liability. I sat down at my desk and opened my email. I had set up specific filter rules months ago. Any communication containing the keywords Brian, Sarah, or consultancy was automatically routed to a folder labeled quarantine. I clicked on the folder. It was empty. The system was working perfectly. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Brian's consultancy had quietly folded. Without the implied connection to Marcus Sterling, his investors had pulled out. Sarah had tried to pivot to being a lifestyle guru on social media, posting vague, passive-aggressive quotes about toxic families, but her engagement was low. They were shouting into a void I no longer monitored. I closed the tab. I didn't feel a spike of triumph. I didn't feel a pang of loss. I felt the cool, sterile satisfaction of a verified manifest. They were a bad investment I had finally written off. I looked around my office. On the wall, next to the map of active relief zones, hung a framed photo. It was a candid shot from the gala me, Marcus Sterling, and my team, laughing over a shared joke. That was my architecture now. I had built a family out of respect, shared mission, and competence. I realized then that peace isn't something you find. It is something you engineer. You build it by laying the foundation of self-respect and erecting walls against those who would tear it down. If you are listening to this, and you are currently sitting in the shadows of your own life, I want to speak directly to you. If you are the one pressing the uniforms while everyone else sleeps, if you are the one double-checking the reservations while they complain about the traffic, if you are the quiet architect behind someone else's loud success, listen to me. You are not invisible. You are simply in a room with people who are blind. Stop trying to explain your value to people who profit from ignoring it. Stop trying to translate your language of service into their language of status. You do not need their permission to be great. You do not need their applause to be valid. There is a moment waiting for you where you will stand on a stage, or in a boardroom, or on a field, and you will realize that you are the one holding the keys. Do not give them to anyone who hasn't earned them. Walk away from the table where you are served last. Build your own table. Secure your own perimeter. My name is Jasmine. I am a commander, and I am finally reporting for duty on my own terms.